Let's talk about XLOOKUP, which is one of Excel's newest formulas intended to replace vlookup, hlookup, and potentially even index match. The problem is it's only available on Microsoft 365 or Office 2021. All right, let's take a look. Let's start off with the basics of the XLOOKUP formula. Let's say we wanted to bring in the quantity here from our data set for a specific product. And in this case, we're looking at iced coffee. So let's start with equals X lookup, and the lookup value will be here in cell J5 for iced coffee. Use F4 to anchor, comma, and the lookup array will be here in column C for the product, comma, and the return array will be the quantity in column D. Enter, and that's it. That's how you do a basic XLOOKUP formula. You need those three essential components of a lookup value, a lookup array, and a return array. Now you'll notice there's a few other optional items in this formula. If we hit a comma, there's an if not found, which is basically a built-in if error. We can just say, just leave it blank, two quotation marks, comma, and then match mode, the default is 0 or exact match. Occasionally you might want to use -1 or 1 to tell it to look for the next smaller item or even next larger item. But in this case, we want to leave the 0 of an exact match. There was also the option of a wildcard in case you don't find an exact match, but that's only if you have a product name or a lookup value in which it's not exact and you're not going to have an exact match. But in this case, we do have an exact match, which is why we're going to put 0. And then finally, there's the search mode, which default is the 1 or search first to last. But occasionally you might want to tell it to search from last to first, or even a binary search where it sorts ascending or descending order. But that should be rare, and usually you'll just want to search first to last. And you can put in the 1 or just leave it blank either way. Great. Now let's say we wanted to bring in the price for these products based on this pricing grid that we have down here. So let's again start with an equals X lookup. And in this case, the lookup value will be the quantity in column D, comma, and the lookup array will be the quantity ordered. Cells C19 through C23, F4 to anchor, comma, and the return array will be the price, D19 through D23. Comma, if not found, let's just put in a 0. And finally, for the match mode, this time instead of doing an exact match, this is where the -1 option for exact match or next smaller item comes in. So put in -1, close it up, enter. And then you can just copy this down. Now, the reason we needed a match mode of -1 is that you'll notice in this pricing grid, we have a quantity of 300 for sparkling water. And you'll notice that lands right in between these two tiers. So the way the formula works is it tells it, once you reach quantity ordered of 250, then the price is $6. And not until you reach 400 does the price change. So in this case, we wanted to bring in the price point of $6. So this is correct. All right, and finally, now we can just calculate the revenue, which is the quantity multiplied by the price. Drag that down. And then finally here, we can fill in the revenue. You can simply do copy down to this formula. Use Control-Alt-V for paste special, F for formulas, enter. And you'll notice it's still pulling from the quantity column. So you can just drag it over so that it pulls from the revenue column. And there you go. That's how you do a basic XLOOKUP. Now let's take it up a notch. Let's go over to this next tab. And what we're going to do is fill in this table that has additional criteria now, specifically the revenue, gross margin, and EBITDA options, as well as the monthly options. So we have multiple months here. So in this first box, we need to fill in sparkling water. So let's start with equals X lookup. And the lookup value will be the month in cell M5, hit F4 twice to anchor on that row, and the product in cell L8. Hit F4 to anchor it there, comma, and the lookup array will be the month, B6 through B23, F4 to anchor, and the product, C6 through C23, F4 to anchor, comma, and finally the return array will be the revenue. So go ahead and select that entire thing, F6 through F23, F4 to anchor, close it up, and hit enter. Great. Now let's just copy it over to the other months. Use Control-Alt-V for pay special, F for formulas, enter. And there you go. Bringing in the revenue for all of these items. So in order to bring in the gross margin and the EBITDA, you could just copy the formula down and manually change the array to look at EBITDA or gross margin or whatever you need, like this. But that's not very efficient. If you need to be able to copy this to many formulas quickly, then the way to do it is to add yet another XLOOKUP into your formula to give it the ability to look up across multiple columns. And here's what I mean by that. So let's go back into this formula, and we're going to go into the return array. So let's just delete out what's currently there. And we're going to add another XLOOKUP. Say XLOOKUP. And in this case, the lookup value will be the gross margin that we need here. So hit F4 3 times to anchor on that column, comma, and the lookup array will be these headers, revenue, gross margin, or EBITDA, F5 through H5. F4 to anchor, comma, and finally the return array will be this entire range of data from F6 to H23. Hit F4 to anchor, and then finally we need one more parentheses, close it up, and you're done. And there you go. Now you can simply copy this formula to everything, and it automatically brings it in based on the criteria that you've specified. Another way to do it is rather than using a second XLOOKUP formula, we can use the offset formula. And we'll need a helper column to do so. So let's number these items here, 1, 2, 3. And again, let's start the formula with equals XLOOKUP, lookup value of the month, and the product, a lookup array of the month in B6 to B23, and C6 to C23, comma. And for the return array, this is where, rather than use another XLOOKUP, we're going to use offset. And the reference will be the revenue in F6 to F23, F4 to anchor, comma, rows will be 0, and the columns will be K15 minus 1. Close it up, enter. So let's copy that over, Control-Alt-V for pay special, F for formulas, and there you go. So let's talk about the offset formula again. The reference here, which is pulling the revenue, is our starting point in the offset formula. And for the rows, it's 0 because we don't want it to move along the rows, but rather we want it to move columns. So gross margin is 1 column to the right of revenue, and EBITDA is 2 columns over to the right from revenue. And that is why specifically for revenue, we're using this value in K15 of 1 minus 1, which is 0, and therefore it doesn't offset any columns. But then for gross margin, in K16, we've numbered it as 2, and we need it to offset 1 column to the right, column G, which is why the value of 2 minus 1 equals 1. And then finally, EBITDA, we needed to offset 2 columns to the right from revenue over to the EBITDA column. And that's why in this case, 3 minus 1 equals the 2 columns that we needed. So that's why that works. But either way, it's a matter of preference whether you want to use 2 XLOOKUP formulas or XLOOKUP with offset. But it's nice to know that it works. And then finally, for this last product, we have iced tea, which we can simply just copy over either set of formulas to this box. But if you hit F2 to open up the formula, you'll notice that our lookup value here is still looking up at sparkling water rather than iced tea, which is what we need. So the quick and easy way to fix that is to tell it to, rather than looking at cell L8, let's do a quick find and replace. So select that entire box and use Control H to bring up the find and replace box. And we're going to tell it to replace L8 with L20, which is where the iced tea is located. Then from there, you can just hit tab twice and click enter for replace all. And you're done. So now it is correctly pulling in the right product. And then if we look at our totals here, we can see on the right, we have total revenue of 24,136, which matches this total here, gross margin of 12,068, and EBITDA of 4,827. So it works. Let me know of any questions in the comments, and thank you for watching. Talk soon.